Hello, everybody. I'm Alan. I hold shift on a Frio.
My name is Andy Proper Neckrich.
And this is the Defuse. Let's get this thing lit. Let's get things started because we got a lot to talk about in our first day of games with the New York home series with the CDL 2020. It was a good day of games. And I will say, just to start things off, my predictions were 90% correct. I missed one map. That's it. I had a good day today, Andy.
I mean, I was sitting there just watching everything, and as everything unfolded, too, I just always go the safe route. I'm just like, yeah, this is a 3-1. Yeah, it's gonna be a 3-1. It's gonna be 3-1. And you know what? I was right as well. So you know what? I don't care. I'm right there with you. I'm very
Okay.
happy with how I predicted the day.
Well, we'll give you just a small golf clap. I won't even say round of applause, just a small golf
I'll
clap.
pat
No
myself on
pats
the
on the
back for
back.
you.
No, we don't do
Too
that
bad.
now because we're in social distancing time. We don't do any pats on backs.
I
Let's
patted myself on the back.
Oh, well, then I guess we'll mostly take that. Let's talk games though. These are things that we want to take as we've got Toronto and Paris was the first scheduled match this evening. And well, I'll tell you, this was one that I was not 100% sure on because again, we did get a chance to take a look at a Toronto team that looked extremely scary after their performance last weekend, adding Kleenex into the mix. But the weird thing about this Toronto team was we kind of all agreed that the five-man that they played with last weekend was the best five-man approach for Toronto. They seem to know something we don't, as Classic would be subbed back in again for medals, and it would turn up to be pretty positive for them as they were able to take all three respawns, only dropping the Search and Destroy on Petro 6-3.
Yeah, I mean, again, maybe obviously Toronto, the coaches obviously know something that we don't about these players, something in classic for medals. And that was something that I brought up too. Keep in mind that when you guys were talking about that exact episode, it was you and Austin, but I was
Yeah.
sitting there off in the distance and I was just always pandering. I was like, medals is not necessarily being the bright star that we always thought that they had the potential of being. And I thought that classic wasn't terrible either. I thought that classic, along with these other four members, could actually pop off and being able to fulfill the role. And we're able to do just that, pulling out the trophy and being able to allow other members for the team and be the aggressor. It really helps out the entire team. You got to see it from Bance's POV. You got to see it from CleanX's POV. Even Methods and Cammy were able to do the same.
The thing that really kind of blew my mind was not only did Classic have a good day today, but he had a good day today playing on an SMG, which was not something that a lot of SMG players could walk away from today and say. But I want to go back to the ARs first because that's where things really kind of popped off. Of course, we were kind of considering that would this be M4s everywhere? People were saying not just maybe doubled AR, but maybe there's going to be triple. And then Skies, I wouldn't be surprised to see a fourth or a fifth for some off the rip kind of strategies. We did get to see those three ARs immediately for the Toronto side, specifically, like you mentioned, for Bance, Cammy, and Methods. In that first map on the Gunrunner Hardpoint, they all almost went plus 10 kills, above 30 kills independently for each of the three of them. Paris did not do the same thing. So, with M4s in the mix, I had said it when we were talking while we were watching. This feels like if this meta stays, this Toronto team very well could be a major contender come playoff time. Likely they'll still have to fight from a lower seed, but I think this meta absolutely showcases the best and truest potential of this Toronto Ultra team right now.
I mean, I'm going to agree with you, but I'm also just going to sit there and just play devil's advocate that this was not the
Yeah, you would.
greatest sample size. I know, I'm always here. I'm always here. You can't see it because of the headset, but there are horns underneath there, baby. I'm telling you. But like, when you think about it, it's not exactly the greatest sample size. Paris have been on a pretty steady decline since the launch weekend. And for Toronto to walk in, the only real questions that I have is just really looking at for their domination setups and for search and destroy is where things got relatively close. But I'll sit there and I'll agree with you as well that yeah, when you have methods and you also have Bance just popping off with the M4 and being able to flex over to the MP5 when need be, I agree that Toronto could end up finding a lot more value towards the tail end and going in towards champs with the M4 galore mentality.
So on the opposite side for Paris, obviously the meta does not favor them any more than what we saw previously. I won't say terrible losses on Hardpoint. Yeah, one of them was a 237 to 250, but that was on Hackney Yard, where Toronto
Yeah.
was just essentially playing to secure the win. But their respawn continues to be a major struggle. Since things went online, they have won two dominations, and then hold your horses here. They've only won three hard points. That's over the course of four total weekends that they've played. I didn't even realize that until I was looking at the stat sheet and I said it out loud. At this point in time, we talked about how Optic Gaming might have to chalk this season. Paris might be right there with them.
They have the entire package that you can buy in the Modern
It's
Warfare store now.
multicolored.
Yeah. I mean, it's It's not looking too good. You know,
No.
we talked about early on in the season how Kismet was able to pop off and how you were able to see a lot of good bright spots. But when Dens is the brightest star on your entire team, not saying that Dens is bad by any means, but it's your main AR that's popping off the most and trying to find most influence. You're not breaking hills with that. You're not necessarily securing all the rotations in the world if it's just one, if not two players popping off at the same time. And that's where you have other teams that are on the up and up. I mean, look at New York, for example. Toronto's also right there with them,
Yeah.
too. Making changes throughout the entirety of the regular home series action is what's going to be able to benefit you towards champs. And Paris just has not made those changes.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and I think they are a little bit handcuffed because of their substitute situation. Although, this is just something just off the top. We were talking about the potential. Phantoms is on the bench. This is a player that no one,
True.
I don't think, has actually mentioned at all throughout the entirety of the year, but he was a solid AR player in Black Ops 4. Is it too late to give Phantoms a shot to pick up a third or second potential main AR here for
You got
Paris, in
left
your
to
opinion?
lose. What do you got left to lose?
Nothing, I guess.
At this point, like you're just so far at the bottom, and you're only again like so you get DFR'd here in at the New York home series. Again, like what do you have left to lose? You
Yeah.
got what, one more event that you're playing in Paris. So I mean, for when you're looking at that, and champs is right around the corner, you got to pull out the wild card. You got to see if it's going to work. Anything at this point, trialing another player, I don't care. Something's got to happen to Paris. They got to make some changes if they ever have hopes of making it out of even the first round that they play at champs.
Yeah, if they could even win a game. I mean, the only game they've won since things have gone online were versus Seattle Surge, and that took map 5 to get there. So, yikes, not good stuff right now
Yay!
for the Paris Legion. Yeah, hooray! Like the most sad sounding sound you could possibly imagine. Chicago versus London up next, and this was one that I was interested in, mostly because again we saw hints of this London team at the Seattle home series where they looked really good. And it was one of those things that the kind of way that I framed it up when I talk to people about it, or if I have a chance to make a video on it, is that this London Royal Ravens squad really seems to be the epitome of hot and cold. They're either blowing teams out or they're getting blown out. The amount of times that they have had close games are extremely minimal compared to the rest of the CDL. That said, they go up against the Chicago Huntsman team, which I was anticipating to be a 3-0 for Chicago, and they put up a pretty reasonable fight. Not only do they take one of the hard points, but they also kept the domination relatively tight throughout this series. So the respawns were close all the way through here. The surprising thing was the Piccadilly search and destroy, where we had talked about Waskin's going to have to hit snipes if London's going to be good at search and destroy. He did, but Chicago just looked that much better. So your takes on London after seeing them play up against the Chicago team before we talk about the Huntsman?
I just think that when you're looking at London as a whole and you're looking at all of these members included, like there's just something that's not clicking with them on Hardpoint exclusively. And we were how many times we were going to sit there in the first opening Hardpoint and we're just going to keep an eye on Shawnee but until they're not triple negative before breaking into about P4, if not P5. That the twins can only do so much. Zero, we were talking about it as well. That if you're going to be playing the MP5, you got to pick up the pace a little bit here because it's just not necessarily the mentality holding on to the MP5 by playing a standing laid back M4 style and letting
Yeah.
the kills come to you. You got to be able to take the map away from your enemies. And going up against Chicago Huntsmen, when you're thinking about the two that were running the MP5s mostly was Envoy and Scump. Yeah, they're not necessarily shy to be taking the map pressure away from you, especially if you're London Royal Ravens and letting for those things to come to you. But when you go to the search and destroy, Alan, I mean, we talked about this a little bit. Chicago, they clearly went back through the time that we haven't seen them to the grindstone, and they were able to work out their search and destroy habits to be able to come out and being able to take it away from London Royal Ravens. Informal out sniping. I mean, I think that kind of says a lot within its own.
Well, I don't know if necessarily I'd say it was an out sniping, but he was keeping par. And I think that was the biggest thing as well, kind of going back to the respawn just briefly, was we saw Scraps with that second AR. He was helping London keep pace with Chicago, especially in
Sure.
that gun under hard point off the rip, which they won 250 to 201. But beyond that, there definitely seems to be a bit of a disconnect as far as what London is trying to execute on their search and destroy. The good news here, and getting to the overall topic, was the fact that Chicago, we were worried about their search and destroy after their last outing. And I will say, I would not be surprised if this was a set strategy. Let's say, hey, we don't play a lot of Piccadilly. A lot of people know that. They hadn't played Piccadilly since Dallas, which was the last time they had a chance, and that was a 4-6 loss
It's
that
true.
they faced to Florida. So this was a map that I'm sure London was probably comfortable to pick. I imagine this was probably their pick. I couldn't say that for sure. I don't know that, but I would imagine this was probably London's pick, and Huntsman, I think this was their ace up their sleeve. They're going to sit here and say, what is London most likely going to play on in Search and Destroy? The answers would most likely be Gunrunner and Piccadilly. So the fact that they get the Piccadilly, they get a lot of preparation done, and they look as good as they did versus the London Royal Ravens, I think you're looking at a Chicago team that has the exact right mindset of what do we need to do to win a championship in a month and a half or so whenever finals comes around. And so far, I think that what you saw versus London is a very good step in the right direction towards possibly doing that.
Yeah, and I think just to go back to a previous point that we brought up here too is that I mean you even saw it whether or not you saw it or not, or all of you watching that. Prasini came out with a tweet that's saying kind of misses the old AR in their
Yeah.
hands too, and Prasini didn't look too bad because I mean we you and I talk about this a lot with Prasini coming into the lineup for the Huntsman too, and I think the analogy that I brought up during this entire match was like it felt like a stake in the ground and the leash got put on the boy because he's not just going off all willy nilly anymore. That he's able to refrain from just going off and looking for these solo plays. And the M4, the triple AR setup, doesn't look too bad on Chicago. No. And I think that this could also, we talked about it happening with Toronto. How about a team that is also able to get aggressive when need be with 3 ARs and having, Scump, having the King being able to just take the map away with Envoy? I think that this is a really good recipe for Chicago to make a really good run in Con Champs and through the rest of the weekend as well.
And I love the way that I think it was Maven and Burke that framed this one up when they were talking about the fact that if you're Chicago, yeah, you're an incredible hardpoint team, but you can't rely on taking every single hardpoint every single time you play. That's not going to win you a championship. Getting better at Search and Destroy will win you a championship. And they were able to do that. I mean, we kind of saw that exemplified by their opening strategy, double smoking, getting the bomb down quickly at A. They roll the exact same look in what was that final round, but instead of going for the quick plant, they're waiting for London to challenge through that smoke. It's just the little things that we saw Chicago do definitely showcase that a lot of hours are put in for this Huntsman team since the last time that we saw them, specifically on Search and Destroy, which again, it was kind of a mixed pass. They only won one map at the Minnesota home series. That was versus the Toronto Ultra, where they were able to take it relatively convincingly 6-2. But still, these are all good things for Chicago. The thing about it is we need to make sure that they also stay as convincingly dominant as they have in hardpoint and domination. Yes, they did have a couple of moments. The score lines today were tight, especially that Hackney. But again, it's the kind of the same storyline that we saw all day on Hackney Yard Hardpoint. Teams were just saying, okay, we're up 220 to 160. Let's just make sure we close this game out. Doesn't matter what the final score looks like. Let's just make sure we get the W. Chicago able to do that. So moving forward to another team that we were worried about some corrections, Atlanta specifically with their respawn, would they be able to find a way to get back and find a little bit of an easier rematch this time around versus this Los Angeles Guerrillas team, who again took them to map 5 last time they were around? And I hesitate to say that LAG did not come with the same kind of gusto because Saints looked good, Vivid looked good, but it just looked like, in my opinion, Atlanta looked like the better team here today, as you figured they probably should have.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anybody was probably going to argue against that. But there was also a point that I had in the back of my mind watching this is that yes, Saints did have a fantastic outing in the previous home series, but it was still very inconsistent. Now, you remember on Saturday at the beginning of the day, Saints was irrelevant, and then Saints at the end of the day,
Yeah, true.
very, very relevant. And this is just one of those things again that when you're looking at come champs, inconsistency has to be polished up and it has to be cleaned up as well. And I think Atlanta, again, they have been recognizing this through all of their losses, their defeats, not winning out their home series, losing to Florida Mutineers. They've been hitting the gym, so to speak, as to how they are supposed to be playing the game. And they've showed up in true form here versus versus the Grills. The triple AR setup also working really well for them on that opening map of Gunrunner. And you heard it at Prisa's end interview with LVP that they were talking how you would have thought that it would have been Prisa. I sat there and I asked the same exact question coming into Gunrunner. I was like, is Sip really running the AR? But apparently the young buck loves the AR. Just the same thing with Prasini. Kid feels very comfortable with the M4 in hand and is able to find the same influence that they did. Well, maybe not, 50 kills influence with the MP5, such on a 0K, but still able to find a lot of good value. They still dropped 34 kills in that opening hard point. And it just allows Prisa to continue to be the route man and to always work those fine pinches that we know from to join with a BZ on hard points and even Search and Destroy.
This is the thing. This is not even close to being on topic, but I had the same kind of reaction to watching Priesta play last year, is that he was the glue that is so pliable and flexible that he is really the reason why the team is as strong as they are. Even though he's not talked about a lot, it's just he fulfills the role that no one seems to want to. Like Sip says, I want to play AR. Priestess says, okay, go ahead and have it,
Cool.
friend. Go on, be blessed and move forward and share the love that is the M4 currently. It's a really mature thing. And I think that for as little attention as Priesta gets, the role that he fulfills is absolutely an extraordinary one. He did the same thing when he played last year throughout all of Black Ops 4 as well. Just a really special player to be sure.
I
But
think you get overshadowed too. I mean, Abizi drops
uh,
40 kills in that opening
yeah,
hard point,
you
and you
absolutely,
got to
yeah,
be able to
sure.
focus on for what Priest is doing for the team. Again, the route man isn't necessarily always the one that breaks in towards the spawns. It's also
Right.
gathering a lot of information for the entire team to pop off the way that you see fit too. So I mean, yeah, I mean that's a very good point that you brought up there.
Yeah,
Alan.
I really enjoy, I think, just his candor overall, what he brings to a team. But
Sure.
talking about this matchup specifically, the interesting tidbit outside of what the weapon loadout was what the maps were. They were literally copy paste from what we saw last time around when these guys played each other, which happened again not too long ago at the Minnesota home series. And it was a bit of a surprise, right? Because the keys to victory then were the fact that LAG steal one respawn and take both search and destroys, and you can beat this Atlanta FaZe team. The keys to victory, in my mind, were going to be the same going into this matchup again, even more so considering that it was the exact same maps that we had last time. The only thing that was different was the results were flipped. So it was the different individual map results on the same maps, but it still ended up with the same overall result. But what I'm interested in, and I think this talking point in my mind kind of comes to the resiliency that Atlanta FaZe have to sit there and say, we will play you on the exact same maps. We trust our process. We trust our ability to make corrections, and we trust that those corrections will be significant for us to get the win next time around. And that was 100% the case. What was the first time around? A 250-239 win on a Gunrunner hardpoint for LAG turned into a 210 to 250 loss for them. What was a 6-4 loss for them last time around on Search was a 6-4 win for them this time on Search. It's almost everything was mirrored backwards, which is really interesting to see. But I think, again, it kind of speaks to the resiliency that this Atlanta FaZe team has when it comes to knowing their mistakes and how they're going to fix them to make sure they come back as the better squad next time around.
Yeah, sure. And you could say the same thing about LAG. You know, the bread and
Sure.
butter search and destroy being for that team on that gunrunner search and destroy was fantastic to see. I mean, you know, how many times are you just going to rely on a BZ to find 3, if not 4 kills within a single round before you finally get scouted out and you start pulling yourself back to deal with that sucker when you're on defense? And again, for Gorillas, I think that's a very fine point that you can have because, like we were talking about from previous teams such as Chicago Huntsman. Uh, you can have a refined search and destroy. You got to be good at that game mode because when you get to that map 5, you've seen it from FaZe, it's going to win you championships, it'll win you
Yeah.
matches and everything else in between. So I think LAG are definitely well on their pace, but now you got to be looking at the respawn because they are keeping it close in certain instances, like you were talking about all those score lines and how it was relatively close all the way until the final moments to that 40-point loss of the first hard point, a 50-point loss on the second hard point of Hackney Yard. And it just came down to a few different points of interest that you could be talking about, whether or not it was controlling the OE, forcing out spawns, anchoring those spawns, fighting for the scrap time, but that you're also dealing with the monstrosity that is just Atlanta and the pace that they also said. It doesn't necessarily matter who's going to be in the first hill, or if you're going to win out the rotation, Atlanta will more than likely walk in and just break you anyway.
My biggest thing about this Gorillas team is as we kind of got a little bit of an eye peeling opening, an eye opening experience last time around, I guess is probably the best way of saying it. During the Minnesota home series, they make it to a playoff, they take FaZe to 5, they nearly make it to a grand final, and a lot of it did come off of a special performance from Saints as well as from Vivid. Not to take too much away from Aqua and Blast, and for them to kind of keep moving their movement forward, but for me, it's just one of those things that like you read off the rest of those names of that roster, and you just don't feel overwhelmed by saying them out loud. Like palatably, it's just a roster that doesn't really feel like it's ever going to be a top 5 roster. And I think there just might be too much stacked up and individually, maybe for these guys to make a move. Again, this is just off the top of my head. I could be just spewing complete nonsense right now, but it's one of those things that I'd be interested to see how they match up tomorrow versus Paris team, which you figure should be a win. And then
Yeah,
when they
for
take
sure.
up the loser of either Atlanta or Toronto, likely, what does that look like? Is this LAG team, do they have the capability to reach for a top 6, top 5, or is this kind of a flash in the pan? Cool, great ending to the season, but playoffs is still not going to be all that favorable for you. I don't know. It's one of those things that it feels like you look at this roster on paper based on what they've been able to do, not just this year, but even near the tail end of last year, and you're kind of sitting here saying, this doesn't really feel like there's not a lot of specialness, especially, I don't know, special anything.
I
What
mean,
am I trying to say? I don't even
at the
know. It
beginning and
doesn't
the
feel very
halfway
special.
mark, yeah, I'm not there. I'm there with you, to be honest. Like at the beginning of the season, midway through the season, you just read off the names and you're like, yeah, they're all right at COD, sure. But, at this
Right.
point in time, you look at these names and you're like, yeah, Decimate could pop off at certain points in time. Vivid is nasty at Search and Destroy. Aqua shows up from time to time. The only word that I can bring up when I'm looking at these individuals through the Modern Warfare season leading up to champs is inconsistency.
Yeah, true, true, true.
And that's what I'm mostly looking at through tomorrow. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record when it comes down to LAG, but it's truly their biggest problem at this point is
Yeah.
just being consistent. If they could just somehow just keep the knife hot at the beginning opening of these hard points and through the entirety of Search and Destroy, yes, this team would be very, very good. But it's just there's always just something there
Something's
that just
missing.
yeah, something's missing, and
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you what it was. So, Shift is it couldn't even tell you what it was. It's just nothing special. It's nothing special
It,
coming out of this team.
it kind of feels like Vivid has to be like an awakening for this team. He's got to find a way to continue to be a monster at this game to
Yeah,
kind of drag them through the
good point.
proverbial mud. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Let's talk about the final matchup of the day at all. The
It's
New York
weird.
Subliners going up against the Minnesota Rocker, and this was a tale of really two different types of stories here because you've got New York, who's on the rise, Minnesota, who's been on a very steep and slippery decline. And well, things would not be any better here for Minnesota as they go 3-1 in total, only taking a narrow win on what was the Hackney Yard domination. Throughout the rest of it, though, pretty convincing. Probably two of the most convincing, if not the most convincing, hard point wins we've seen from New York in some time. This, I would say, really since adding Mac, these have been the best wins that they have had, really outside of the time at the Chicago home series where they were able to actually beat the Atlanta FaZe in two hard points, 251-77, and they put them in the 100-point club on Petro. But a 250-144 on the Gunrun and a 250-157 on Ramaza, that to me just says this is absolutely definitive. I will say this, though. When I was looking at this matchup before it happened, kind of comparing the two teams, all of Minnesota's best map mode combinations were New York Subliners instant vetoes. Minnesota didn't get a chance to play a Zero Cave because Subliners instant veto Zero Cave. They don't get a chance to go to Piccadilly because New York Subliners instant veto Piccadilly. And they don't get a chance to go to the Petro domination because New York Subliners instant veto St. Petro domination. So kind of like a bad draw of the luck for Minnesota. But the way that I was kind of framing this up in my predictions was that Minnesota, if you want to turn the attention around on you and say that this is a good team, what better way to do it than take down a potential upsurging squad of the Subliners on maps that you're not notoriously great at? Unfortunately, that didn't come to be here.
And that's also a big burden for Minnesota too. Is that
Huge burden.
you can't win maps unless they're on your favorite picks. And well, New York are not only just very talented individuals, but they're also very smart. And you're going to be dealing with that come champs, come the rest of the weekend. That they're just going to keep vetoing out your best maps. So you probably won't see much of Zero Cave versus Minnesota. You probably won't see much Piccadilly. It's probably going to be a lot of different maps that Minnesota aren't necessarily comfortable on, but they can't squeak them out. They can't even keep them close. Look at that Ramaza hardpoint, 250-157. The entire team of New York just put Minnesota on their ass, and that's just something that you can't have happening for a Minnesota team that we were still on land. We're handing Atlanta FaZe defeats. We're keeping things really close with the top three teams in the entire league. And now you come on to this online scene, and with an upsurge New York roster like you were just talking about, Alan, that is on the up and up, they can't keep pace with them. It's just tough scenes.
And it's a map that, again, it's not their bread and butter necessarily, but Minnesota, when you look at their hardpoint in total, that is their best mode that they're able to kind of flex right now. They technically, based on just what the point differentials have looked at and their win percentages, this is the number 4 hardpoint team in the game currently, just based on those statistics alone.
Sure.
I mean, opinions are obviously going to change because they did essentially just go 50, 50, 50, 50 all the way through the Paris home series. For the most part, with a couple of exceptions where they didn't get a chance to get to game 4. But it's just, at this point, I'm completely lost for this Minnesota Rocker team. And we kind of talked about it and before we go into this next segment, I have to be completely candid with you guys. This is not at all shots at Alex. This is not at all shots at downplaying the seriousness of his hand. I'm questioning if his injury is more serious than he's letting on, in fact.
Yeah,
Simply because we heard about the whole fact that his thumb was causing him problems. Exceed subbed in when they played up against the Seattle Surge at their own home series. And you were mentioning it, and it was very well put that thumb issues, the cartilage in your thumb does not heal over the course of a week. You could be out for a while. And I'm just wondering if this is a more serious condition than maybe the Minnesota Rocker or Alex are letting on, and if that's going to impact them for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, a humble flex, like that. I used to spend time as a performance coach, but also at the same point in time, when you think about the cartilage in your thumb and all the muscles that include that's not something that just ends at your wrist. That's something that goes all the way up your elbow, that
Yeah.
connects all the way to your collarbone. And if you're just grinding out for champs, if you are this Minnesota Rockers squad and you're still having Alex play day in and day out, I mean, we're talking like what, like 8 to 10 hours worth of playing per day.
At least,
That's
yeah.
that's dangerous. This is borderline carpal tunnel. And then when you get towards that limit and you are at the age that Alex is, that is something that you have to be very cognizant of. And we're not just talking about through the rest of the season going through champs. We're looking all the way down the road for next year, many more years to come. This poor individual is going to be dealing with this pain for quite some time. And
Yeah.
although we just got the word today that Exceed would be playing for Alex, tells me that Alex had not really been resting that thumb. And even looking at their player camp today, had nothing covering it, had nothing to really give it a lot of good brace. And that's really troublesome for someone like me that knows a lot just about a carpal tunnel for one, and it's just how the muscle works around that exact group of your hand. It's just scary to beyond belief because Alex is a very talented player, and it would really suck not only for Minnesota fans but for everybody that is in the gaming community to see such a star-studded individual go down in such a way. Because again, you're just grinding for champs. I totally respect where you're coming from, but at the same point in time, we're talking about your health at this point.
Yeah, again, we're not trying to speculate that we know the severity of what his condition is at
It's just a
all, but
possibility.
it's something that I think merits being brought up. Obviously, he did not have a great day today. Something's to be said again for him still running an SMG in the face of multiple ARs, of which again Mac looked absolutely filthy with. Temp even looked good with when he picked it up every now and again. But it's one of those things that you just are a little bit worried, in case something is worse than maybe he might be letting on. So
Right.
we're hoping that everything is okay. We're hoping that this was just an off day for Minnesota, and we can turn around tomorrow and say that we're in the clear and things are starting to look a little bit more positive. Because on the other side of this coin is the New York subliners getting all of the glow that they deserve because they played incredible really all the way throughout the day. Again, they do drop that Hackney Yard domination, but they played well. And compared to how they played it against Florida the weekend before, they looked like they made some improvements there. So New York as a whole is one of those things that I think that we're not done seeing how far this team can rise. This could very well be a team that very well could take their own home series, of which there's only one other team to do that. That'd be the Atlanta FaZe. So be interested to see if that's able to come through or not. Speaking of getting in or getting out, though, we've got, of course, knockout matches and qualifier matches to start the day. And then, of course, last chance qualifiers at the end of the day. So pardon me for the logo slander here, but we've got ourselves a little bit of an in or out that I want to just give you a couple of teams. And I want to get your take on if you think they're going to be into the playoff or if they find themselves on the tail end. Starting things off, I want to hear about the Toronto Ultra from your opinion. Are they a playoff team or are they going to get knocked out?
Well, let's put it this way: they won't beat Atlanta, just flat
Okay.
out. Will they make it in towards Sunday? Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Just
Okay.
because I'm just gonna sit here and say that whoever somehow wins. All right, I'm not gonna lie. I have Gorillas beating Paris, and then I have Toronto beating Gorillas, and it's just because again the word inconsistency comes to mind that I can see absolutely at Atlanta making out of groups, and Toronto's right there with them.
Okay. I'm torn on that one because I've got Toronto losing to Atlanta like you do, and I've got LAG beating Paris. But that matchup between LAG and Toronto is going to be a really interesting one. I think it really just comes down to which LAG are we going to see in respawn.
Exactly.
This is a team that is dead last in the overall rankings when it comes to both hardpoint and domination statistically. Now that said, over the course of what we'll say the last 5 games, they've looked better. But even though we say better, in those last 5 games, they've won a single domination. So it's tough to really kind of be sold on them 100%, even though they've had a couple of tough games. Again, they had to play up against, this is why, again, I think this is interesting. They had to play up against Florida, Chicago, Atlanta, and then Atlanta again. But to start that whole sequence off, they played up against Toronto, in which they won in game 5. But while doing that, they also got a 100-point clubbed on Hackney Yard Hardpoint. So I'm
Yep.
right there with you. I think the consistency definitely lends towards Toronto making it into the playoff. And I guess before we go too far, we will promote. You'll see it coming up next year. If you guys have questions about anything we've talked about so far, whether it's something simple or something more specific, feel free to reach out. Exclamation point questions or exclamation point giveaway, I believe, will get you a link to our current Twitter post, which will showcase this exact same image that you're seeing here that we're taking to your guys' viewer questions. If we select your question to answer, you get 5 credits on CMG. Pretty easy way to get yourself a couple of easy entries right there just by submitting questions. So make sure you do that. Next team up that I want to frame up to you moving forward, you've got New York and Chicago that are coming up. Out of that matchup, who gets in your opinion?
Between Chicago and New York?
Yeah.
After seeing Chicago today, I'm not gonna lie, man. I got Chicago taking that. I think Chicago through their search and destroy can definitely push it. This is going to a map 5. They strap yourselves in for this one because this is definitely going to a map 5. Though I do see Chicago taking it. I don't necessarily think that when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the hard points, it will be close. I could see New York probably taking the first one, but I definitely see Chicago taking the back half of that map 5 series. It's going to get absolutely crazy. And honestly, if it gets a 3-0 fashion, New York versus Chicago, shift tomorrow. You and Austin have a full a full rite of passage just to absolutely burn me alive here on this stream because I mean, I can't see this going anywhere besides a map 5, but I absolutely see Chicago taking it.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards Chicago in this one as well. I think mostly because New York is still a little bit unproven in what their domination has yet to show. And I think to win this matchup, New York has got to win both hard points. And then you hope that you can end it in 4. You don't really want to get to map 5. But again, I think Chicago is too prepared here on Search and Destroy. And I don't see them losing both hard points versus a New York team. Just based on the map pools alone, Chicago probably is not going to get allowed to go over to the Zeta Cave, which they would love to, but it does give them the opportunity to play a map like Petro, which they're also very strong at, as well as we've seen them absolutely dominate on Hackney Yard lately, including the fact that out of their last, 6 games, they've won 5 of them. So that's all good news for Chicago. I've got them getting it as well. Before we really kind of tail off to viewer questions, who would be your biggest Cinderella in who's left here? Obviously, everyone's left. Who would be your biggest Cinderella that has a chance to make it into the playoffs that we haven't talked about yet?
That could make it into playoffs. That could make it to
could.
Sunday.
Could.
Gorillas. Straight up. Straight up. I feel so bad because I keep harping on them every single time it comes to the conversation. They're just so damn inconsistent. And it makes me so upsetty spaghetti that I just got to keep talking about it. I just got to keep talking about it because I'm just seeing meatballs all over the floor when it comes to Gorillas. They have so much they got to pick up on. And it's just terrible. Like, I just think that it would be such a Cinderella story to see the Gorillas make it past Toronto. Because I mean, they'll make it past Paris. I think everybody can make it past Paris. Maybe. I don't know. I got to see Seattle Surge, but again, I think it would just be or optic. So I mean, I think it would just be massive for the Gorillas to make it there.
Hold your phones.
I do feel bad.
Here's my Cinderella. London Royal Ravens. The thing about it is they play Minnesota, of which they've not played yet before, but they're looking like they're better than Minnesota. Then you get the loser of Chicago or New York, of which we're both saying that New York is probably going to lose that matchup. Hold your stats here, friends. London is 3-0 at a 9-2 map count versus New York, as recent as Seattle, in which they 3-0'd them. Scraps is looking like a totally different monster on the M4. I've got the potential of London Royal Ravens completely surprising this weekend and making it into a playoff. And if that happens, I may be the first one to have said that, I think. Out of everyone
I just don't have them as a Cinderella story because they've made it to a finals before and they lost to Chicago.
Yeah, but at the same point, no one's talking about London like they're any good right now. And Scraps looked incredible today.
It was just one person. You know, Weskin didn't find the influential snipes. Shawnee was also very inconsistent.
But they didn't win the rounds.
And he still found a lot of hit markers somehow, some way. You know, always finding those damn hit markers, man.
Man, I'll tell you. We'll see. Let's jump over and take your guys' viewer questions. And if you guys want to ask a question about any of that right there, again, make sure that you do so right now by typing ! giveaway or questions in the chat here. We got a couple of good ones today. One of them from one of our friends here of Mr. JB Megatron. Shout out CCL. He says it's unlikely to happen, and I agree, unlikely to happen. But would you like to see Gunlist return to the lineup in this current meta where it looks like most teams are using the 3 ARs? I assume that he means, would you like to see him return to the Chicago Huntsman roster? But I'll leave this a little bit more open for you to kind of take from here.
Well, rosters are locked first off.
True. Okay, true.
So, if it would be anywhere, it would have to be towards Chicago. And, well, the answer for me, we talked about this actually while we were watching the games today, Shift. I'm going to go ahead and say no. Because I think, although, again, Gunless was there and they were able to take a home series, that's all fine and dandy. But When you talk about just how Chicago have felt with Gunless in as they were on a decline versus now with Preston in the mix with Pristini, they're on a steady incline and vibes. Even watching the scrims through their streams at a very all-time high. You know, they're
Mm.
sitting there, they're learning, they're working really well together, and that's what everyone keeps alluding to as well. I don't know personally. I've never been in the scrim with Gunless. You and I hung out with him after the Atlanta home series. Dude seems really cool, seems really down to earth. But if the vibes aren't there between the five individuals and something's not clicking and you're not able to turn that in towards map or series wins, then no, it just wouldn't be the smartest move. Putting Gunless in over, I would assume, would be over Pristini to run the third AR. But again, Pristini didn't look bad with AR today, so why put
Yeah,
Gunless second? It's fine.
I'm gonna essentially echo that same sentiment, but I'll throw a little bit of a
You agreed with
caveat.
me?
I agree with you. Mark it down to the history books. This is like the third time ever. But the thing about this, that the only way that I see this happening is if Chicago takes a downturn from this meta. Like if they all of a sudden start to look really, really bad in hardpoint and domination specifically,
That's
not
fair.
so much in their search and destroy. I'm not nearly as worried about that. But if their respawn takes a significant hit, again, there is the other side of this coin where they did play London and they barely got past all of the respawns against this London team, which we're still not sure about. So the only way that I see that is if New York comes out, completely smokes them. I'll say this: if Chicago does not make the playoff this weekend, if they lose to New York and then lose again to likely London, then maybe you see some influence of maybe trying to bring Gunless
What
back into the
percentage
mix.
of
But
maybe? What percentage of
like
maybe?
22.65%.
Yeah, I was going to say like 30 at the most. 30 at the
Not
most.
even a quarter. Not even a quarter for sure.
Okay.
Good. It's a good question though. It's a good question.
Yeah. Thank you,
We
Jamie.
kind of talked about this, but this is a good one. We'll just kind of reframe it one more here for Bursted. Shout outs to the SND god. With how the subliners look today in Search Destroy versus Rocker, who are so comfortable on Petro, and he's right. Do you think that if subliners versus Huntsman tomorrow can go the distance, that the subliners will win? I'm going to take this one from you first. I know I kind of framed the question up, but I'm going to take that for
You
myself here.
me.
Just yoinking it. My answer, I think, is still generally no. Mostly because, again, New York, they hard veto Piccadilly. And Chicago, if they saw what they saw versus, with New York versus Minnesota and say, we don't want to go to Petro, that will likely be that Chicago will get a chance to play on what is likely going to look like their gun runner to a New York team that has come up completely empty on Gunrunner lately. So I would say probably not. It just depends on the order of the maps that are picked, but I think that I think for New York, you've got to win the two hard points and your search and destroy. I think if it goes map 5, it means that it would have to be them needing to win both search and destroys. Obviously, I'm not. I don't think that would happen personally.
I already gave my point when we were talking about who's in or out. No, if it goes to a map 5, absolutely not. Chicago will definitely make it. They
Yeah.
will make it out of that war, and they'll be able to see themselves in towards Sunday. But again, I mean, like I would love to be upset by that. I would love to see New York absolutely pop off tomorrow versus Chicago again. You have the full rite of passage that if it happens in a 3-0 fashion and New York just absolutely blaze Chicago Huntsman alive on that broadcast tomorrow, then yes, please burn me alive tomorrow night with Austin. I know you're probably always thinking about it when you're doing a show without me, but definitely do it. But it's just so unlikely. It's just so unlikely versus the Chicago roster that definitely looked a lot better today. Looked a
Yeah.
lot more polished.
I'm right there with you. We got a couple of really good late questions that were added to the mix. We're only going to take one more though. So again, if you asked a question today, there's nothing to say that tomorrow when you see the post go up on Twitter that you can just ask it again. There are a couple of great questions that are in here.
True.
One of which came from Xerxes, which we talked about already when it came down to Chicago search and destroy struggles. But I want to get into a really interesting one. We have not talked about this really at all when it comes down to the status of champs being played online. And I don't even think personally we've talked about this much at all. I know what your opinion is going to be, I think, but we haven't had this open discussion. This comes from Stixes, who asks, do you think that champs should be played online, or should they have some kind of a venue with just the teams and no spectators, just so they can have a fair chance on LAN? I think I know your answer to this one, but I'll let you take it off just to kind of get things going.
Look, the state of the world right now, it's not very good. It's not very good. I mean, in North America alone, it's just not really good. You got people not taking COVID seriously, and that's exactly why it has to stay online. That's why it has to stay online. It's not necessarily that we have to frame the argument that it's for the best Call of Duty possible to be on LAN, we should still be blessed that we're getting very high level and professional Call of Duty as many weekends as we have been.
Yeah.
But when you're talking not necessarily just the state of the game, but you're also talking about the state and the livelihood of individuals and their health, yeah, it has to stay online. I would love to see COD played at LAN again. Me and Shift, we went to the Atlanta home series. It was lit. We
That'd
were
be
the
a
loudest people
blast.
in the crowd. It
Yeah.
was so much fun. But still, at the same point in time, if it's my health, if it's Pistachio's health, if it's Shift's health, I'm not willing
Especially
to
if it's
put that on.
Pistachio's health.
Especially if it's Pistachio's health or anybody's health. Like, I would hate for it to go down. And even if you put them into cubes, like how you saw from what was it, like Apex from Overwatch way back in the day,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. They're all in the same vicinity of one another. Someone's going to show up to it with COVID-19, even without spectators. It's for the benefit of the entire world right now that we just keep it online.
Better safe than sorry is my short way of
Yep.
saying it. It stinks. Obviously, I think we all would love to see it at LAN. I think there are teams specifically who would love to have it be on LAN more than it being online. But
Not
with
Florida.
everything that's going on right now, it's just not it's not the time or the place, I think, to try to risk it at the moment. I think if as research gets better, it gets more in depth to learning about this virus or this pandemic, whatever. I don't even know if it is an actual technical virus or not. But regardless, as more research gets put into this and maybe there's ways to deal with it or mitigate it, then maybe in the future there would be an opportunity. Hopefully it just goes away. I know it's wishful thinking at this point, considering that the statuses doesn't seem to be trending towards that, but I think better safe than sorry is always the right call for it. Again, I have to say thank you guys for coming out and putting on a lot of great questions. There were a lot of them, but we do have to try to hold ourselves to a reasonable amount of time, as we're already about 10, 15 minutes over where we want to be normally. So please come back tomorrow, which is where we'll leave you right now. Again, we held these every single day immediately after the YouTube stream goes down. We go live with all of these awesome kind of qualities and assets. Well, again, Visions will be joining me tomorrow for the show. He's our resident Canadian. I'm sure he's going to be loving to talk about Toronto as they play through tomorrow's game. So please make sure you stop back through. This has been the Defuse. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. But until then, please make sure that fuse doesn't fizzle out. Until next time, so long.